your report, Mr. Martin, as number 13, it's State's Exhibit 229. What are we seeing there?
This is a stairway that comes down from the upper level. I believe it was referred to the sewing room of the home. I don't know if the jury can see it, but may I stand, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. If we look here, or on the monitor here, if you look here, I've placed a green arrow in the photograph at the base of the stairs on the right hand of that riser. And in the next photograph, what we'll see is the blood stain at the base of the stairs. This is, again, to orient you as to where that stain was located.
State's Exhibit 230, your number 14, is that the blood stain you were just referencing?
Yes, sir. So, again, the evidence placard was placed by the investigators here, and what we can see is, again, we have the scale here, placard number 1, stain. Notice we have a circular stain there. So what we have, circular stain, it appears to be a drip stain at the base of the stairs. The thing that we look at, okay, so I have a drip stain here. Well, if I have a drip stain, is it isolated? This appears to be isolated because, at least from the investigative reports, and I can only work with the information that I have. So essentially, could there be some latent stains there? In other words, and let me just say that, excuse me 1 minute. Let me just say this. There are two types of blood stains. There are patent stains, P-A-T-E-N-T. Those are readily visible. There could also be latent stains there. In other words, I could have had a little bit of blood, and let's just use the example of my footwear. It comes up to a point where you don't see the blood anymore on the surface, and let's say the floor. But as I walk along, there's still trace amounts. So that's what we call a latent, because if I take a particular chemical and I treat it, it will actually make that blood stain, which is otherwise invisible, visible. So what we could have here is we obviously have a latent, appears to be a drip stain. Could there have been additional stains? I didn't see any, nor were there any recorded in the report, leading to, and I use the term the living room, or where Mr. Cooper was found, nor did investigators detect anything else. So this just happens to be a, if you want to call it a random stain with no association. Because if I did have, and let's just say I have this drip stain here, drip stain here, drip stain here, many times what we do is we follow, obviously, the drip stains. That's called a drip trail. It tells us where many times it's coming from and where it's going to. But again, this happens to be an isolated stain. It wasn't tested for blood, but at least in my opinion, it appears to be blood. And certainly it appears to be Mr. Cooper's. Could have been from a separate incident. I've certainly had cases where there are blood stains pre-existing in the house that came not only from residents there, but from a previous resident of that apartment. So again, here we have this isolated blood stain, which really doesn't have any connection through a drip trail or any other format.
And Judge, with the court's permission, it looks like 305 has been taken down. I'm going to republish that, if that's okay.
Okay.
You can see that okay, Mr. Martin?
I may have to stand, sir.
All right. Moving on to State's Exhibit number 231. Marked in your report is number 15. What are we seeing here?
So this is a photograph which was taken off the body cam. It's a still frame. And essentially, as the first officer is coming into the room here, his body camera is working. And again, I have the ability to take a frame off of that. And what we have here is we have Karina Cooper here. You can see her as she's straddling. In fact, this happens to be her left leg here. And we can, may I stand, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. We can see that she's on the Mr. Cooper here. And again, one of the things that we look at, even though it's a photograph that appears to be out of focus, or again, it's a body camera, it's moving. So again, what happens is we have some motion in the camera itself. Right away, we start to look for, do I see any blood flow running down his legs, any blood flow here? What do I see? I can see the recliner. The recliner appears to be in the back position, and that reclined. I don't know how far back it reclines, but certainly we can see that the footrest is in the up position. We can also see here the quilt, because again, what are the positions of the items in the room, the evidence in the room? So we can see that there's a quilt behind Mr. Cooper as well.
And you stated that was a still from a body cam. It's noted there as body cam Fangman, I believe.
Yes, sir. Yes, I have it marked as Fangman. Yes, sir.
And for the record, Deputy...
Sir, do you want to pull your microphone down again?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Yes, I have it marked as, it's a photo 15 body cam Fangman.
Just for the record, Deputy Fangman's body cam was previously admitted as State's Exhibit number 102. What are you seeing of relevance to your analysis? I know you already noted that you're looking at the position of the items in the room. You're also looking for flow patterns or the lack of flow patterns on the extremities of Mr. Cooper. Anything of note with regard to the fact that Karina Cooper is on top of the decedent?
So one of the things that we have to consider, and it always comes up, has the scene been altered? It can be intentional or it can be unintentional. So we know that Mr. Cooper, certainly 911 has been called, that he's incurred an injury. We can see that Karina Cooper is on top of him. So right away when we're doing an assessment, or at least I'm looking at the photographs, because ultimately she's removed from Mr. Cooper, we have to take into consideration that there's possible movement of Mr. Cooper by Karina Cooper. Not only that, but what has she touched that could have altered? For example, I could have some, or Mr. Cooper could have some blood on his face, could be moving that blood around, which could be changing the appearance of the stain. So in my analysis, if I had a flow pattern, so flow, as we talked about before, gravity's causing it to run down, well, I could see this movement. Now I know from the body camera, and that's why it's so important that you have to look at all of the evidence, whether it be video or photographic, to be able to account for what patterns we see at the scene.
And so would you characterize Ms. Cooper's actions sitting on top of the decedent here as altering the scene?
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit number 232, again marked as body cam Fangman, marked in your report as number 16. What do we see here?
Again, Your Honor, may I stand, please?
You may.
Thank you. So what we do, again, we have Karina Cooper here on Mr. Cooper's lap. We can see her left arm is up by his face. And now we look at the entirety of the scene. Again, top of the recliner, we can see that there's I use the term quilt there. So in the subsequent photos or in the later photos, I want to see if the position of the quilt is as it's depicted here, because certainly movement by her or movement in removing Mr. Cooper from the recliner could cause the actual movement of the quilt. Also, I have a better view of the room. I'm going to look at the whole room or the entire room. Here we can see this is the doorway to the outside. This is that front door I previously talked about, this being the east side of the dwelling. You can see that the door is closed. So again, was the door open and closed at the time first officers responded? At least here, the door is fully closed. Likewise, as we look in the area of this arm, the left arm of the recliner, I know from looking at the photos, because I looked at the photos prior to looking at the video, I look at the photos to determine was there any blood staining on the arm of the chair, what is the extent of blood staining to Karina Cooper, if any. So again, even though this happens to be a out of focus, again, it's due to the movement. If he were standing still, would have a clearer picture. But again, I can see the quilt here. I can see her position. I know that obviously she's placed her at least left hand on the right side of his face.
Mr. Ringel, let me go ahead and have a seat, but let me just ask, do we need this up? I mean, it does make it so he has to stand more. Is there something else we can do with that?
Judge, we could put it behind the defense table. The purpose of it is to just allow him to show, as we move forward, the different areas where the photographs were taken.
Sure, I understand. It would just, I think, make it more convenient for him, and when he stands up, the microphone doesn't catch. And anyway, so if we could move that, I think, and then also he would have a view of the screen too.
Your Honor, how about it? Could we put it here where she stepped down? This might be a no.
I'll let Mr. Ringel and Mr. Kodiaga figure out maybe where it can go.
All right, as they figure that out in Iowa, we're going to squeeze in a quick break, but don't go anywhere. More testimony in this case when we come back. You're watching Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Kelly Craft, in today for Ted Rollins, along with Julia Janae.
And we're headed back to Iowa, where we have been watching day 4 of the widow's words murder trial for Karina Cooper. She is charged with first-degree murder in the death of her husband, Ryan. He was found with 2 gunshot wounds to the face inside of the couple's home, all back in 2021. And the deputy noted that Ryan's body was in a recliner and Karina was sitting on top of him. We're hearing about that right now.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear what the analyst on the stand is talking about in regard to her positioning and seeing some of that body cam footage. Let's get you back into that courtroom now. More testimony from that forensic analyst, Kenneth Martin.
You stated that you had looked at Deputy Fangman's body camera. You said you're using software that allows you to look at approximately 30 frames per second, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to determine in looking at that footage what Miss Cooper is doing while she's on top of Ryan Cooper?
Well, you'd have to look at the video, but you can see that she's placing her hand across Mr. Cooper and hugging him, as well as in the actual video, you can hear her crying and commenting as well.
Were you able to determine if her face was making contact with...
Yes, sir, in the video, yes. In other words, her face was making contact with Mr. Cooper's face, almost a rubbing motion to the face, yes.
And were you able to tell if that was the left side or the right side of Mr. Cooper's face where she was making contact?
Well, at least in the portion of the video, it appeared to be the right side of the face. In one portion of the video that I specifically recall, yes, sir.
And here it looks as though she's making contact with the left side of his face. Is that correct?
No, that would be the right side, sir. Right? His head is to her. His head is to her left. No, to her right. So his head is. It looks like her head is. This is his head back here on that side of her.
All right. So he's facing forward in the chair.
Right, so that would be the right side of his face. Her face is up against this left side here.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't touch anything.
All right, moving on to what's been marked as State's Exhibit 233, marked in your report as 17. What are we seeing here?
This is a photo which I was provided by Trent Villaret from DCI. This was in his report. I believe it came from one of the body cameras. I'm not sure, but prior to first responders arriving on the scene, and what we see here is Karina Cooper has been removed. And again, what we're looking at here is this is probably one of the earliest photos that we see. And again, we have Mr. Cooper here in the chair. Remember, I talked about flow patterns, trying to determine as to whether he may have been standing at the time, kneeling at the time. Well, first of all, as we look, we see a saturation stain, and I did mention that briefly. Saturation stain is when I have blood that's on something that's porous, such as fabric or clothing. So we can see it's making its way down because of gravity, so it's making its way down, but I don't have any flow pattern going across his stomach. Again, these blankets could have been placed after, post-event, or they could have been there prior to, which again, I don't see any blood on them. Likewise, the other thing that we want to take a look at is his left arm. And one of what we're looking for there is, do we see any evidence, the flow pattern in the shirt? Notice it comes down his sleeve, but there's still a couple of inches. Likewise, we have some blood out here, and I'll talk about that in later slides, but one of the reasons for this blood out here could have been his arm extended out here. So instead of his arm being flexed at the elbow, right here as we see it, into his waist, if the position were out here, blood could have flowed down, because we know the wound is on that left side, could have flowed down his hand, and his fingers could have been here, which account for this, and we'll talk about that later. But from everything that we see, or I see, there's no evidence at all that he was anything other than this position. Likewise, again, what's around him, we can see that quilt. Here's the quilt behind him. We can see on the quilt that shiny area here on the, right side of his face is blood, clotted blood. We can also see over here there's some blood that's amassed here. So again, what we have is the quilt, he's up against it. There's no evidence at all of him in a position other than that reclining position. And again, generally, here's another photo to show that the door was closed at the time. We can see this large pattern here, because again, ultimately when first responders or investigators come to the scene, certainly the dynamics could have changed. You could have some flow going on that could have increased that pattern. So this gives me an idea, at least when this photo was taken, this was what the scene looked like. And again, we had Karina Cooper here. We do know that she was involved in some of the altering of the scene, whether, like I say, we don't know intentional or unintentional, but certainly that gives us an indication that, we have to consider that when we look at the case in summary.
To be clear then, from what you're observing here, this was taken pretty much immediately after Karina Cooper was removed.
Yes, sir.
And there was not a flow pattern down Ryan Cooper's left arm, correct?
Left arm, no, sir. Nor down nor his stomach.
The door is closed, and also there's a vent, I guess we'll say about the middle right of that image. Is that vent covered with a vent cover?
A floor vent, yes, sir. Hot air system, so we have a floor vent in the floor itself. In fact, one other of note, which is important in this case, this floor is actually particle board. At least that's the term I know it is. So unlike if this were a hardwood floor, granted you have a space between the floors, but the floor has been finished, so it's pretty much non-porous. Or if this were inlaid or some type of non-porous surface, the fact that we have this particle board that is somewhat porous, we have to take that into consideration when we're evaluating all of the evidence at the end of this.